I'm Skip Stiles, Executive Director of Wetlands Watch. We're based in Norfolk and work statewide to conserve Virginia's wetlands. So about 10 years ago, Wetlands Watch began to look at the problem of sea level rise and how it was going to affect Virginia's wetlands. We estimated that we were going to lose between 50 and 80% of our vegetated tidal wetlands due to the sea level rise that we were experiencing. So the next challenge was, how are we going to allow these wetlands to migrate uphill and adapt to sea level rise? The problem with allowing the wetlands to move uphill is that there are already people living on the shoreline. The challenge was, how are we going to get these people out of the way so that the wetlands can move uphill? When we began looking at the problem, we found that there wasn't enough money to do the job. In Virginia, you can't just tell people to move. There's little condemnation authority, so you have to buy them out if you want them to leave their property. When we looked around, we found that there wasn't enough money to buy these people out. The money that there was from FEMA and other agencies, it would take decades onto centuries before there was enough money to pay for all of the people who needed to get out of the way. Another problem with buyouts, even if there were enough money, is that local governments get stuck then with maintaining the property. And this can cost thousands of dollars a year per lot. And the burden on local governments was going to grow as we became more and more successful in doing these buyouts. So we began to explore other avenues of funding. And we looked around and we tried to figure out who else is in the business of taking property and putting it into conservation. And we saw that land trusts were already doing a lot of this work. So this led us into exploring whether we could use land trusts and conservation easements and the positive tax values that you get from those things in order to accomplish what we wanted, which was to get people off of the shoreline and allow the wetlands to move uphill with sea level rise.
Hi, my name is Mary Carson Stiff and I'm the Policy Director at Wetlands Watch. As Skip mentioned, we're exploring how land trusts can work with local governments and other organizations to help communities handle retreat from sea level rise. The concept of a land trust assisting with retreat in a community is called a shoreline adaptation land trust. Our pilot project is exploring how a shoreline adaptation land trust can actually work on the ground in a community in practice. We are working with 2 cities to determine how an urban land trust called the Living River Trust can help communities figure out how to manage the land that is most at risk from sea level rise and flooding. In one city, we're looking at transferring FEMA buyout properties from the city to the land trust, which will help reduce the burden of managing the land that's now been open with no structures on it from the city to the land trust, the organization that knows how to do this land management work better than anyone. In the second city, we're working on creating voluntary agreements with property owners and the land trust to help property owners remove themselves from the risk of increased sea level rise. So what does this look like in practice? As sea levels rise, the shoreline is going to change. The water will come into the property and encroach on the structure. As soon as the water gets a certain height, the property owners, they're not going to want to live in their structure anymore because it will be unsafe with this increased flood risk. Once the structure is removed, the shoreline will be allowed to encroach, and wetland species that are either present or were present in the past but are no longer present because the shoreline is hardened, like here, will start to propagate, and they'll move naturally with the shoreline with sea level rise. Therefore, this project is a win-win for both the wetlands and the property owners. This pilot project that we're running is the first of its kind in the nation. We have several working groups with stakeholders and professional experts from across the country working with us directly to make sure that we haven't left out a really big issue that needs to be discussed to make the project and the programs developed in the pilot implementable in other places around the country. In the end, we hope that our work in the pilot project will help other communities and other organizations struggling with the same realities of sea level rise develop and implement the same types of projects in their communities.